Hello, this is Samuel Blanchet and Hunter Williams, and we're here today to talk about unemployment inequality, a tale of two candidates. Now, the two candidates that we have to work with here are Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But the issue, which is more important, is unemployment inequality. And so, right here, we've included a slide about where we are today with this issue. On the left, you can see the article speaks about black workers are twice as likely to be unemployed as white workers at almost every education level. Now, as you can see, this tends to drop and become more balanced the higher an education you get, but it is most definitely a huge problem at the lower ends of education, and even at the higher ends of education, there is a difference in employment. And this doesn't talk about level of employment, purely employment. So somebody at a higher end may, yes, have a degree and a higher level of education, but this data doesn't actually tell us how they're employed or what salary they make relative to their education. And then on the right, we've got the civilian unemployment rate as adjusted for seasons and years over time. Now, as you can see, in 2008, when the recession hit, everybody, every ethnicity and social group became far more unemployed in rates of unemployment. And slowly over time, that has decreased, but you can see that Black or African American groups, and especially non-white groups, were hit the hardest when the recession initially hit and have leveled out at the slowest rate. And now that COVID has come and hit, these same trends are repeating, although Hispanic and Latino have replaced Black and African American as the most disadvantaged social group.
I think it's also important to note that in the graphic on the left, your minority groups, specifically Black minority here on the left, are more likely to have a lower level of education. So that's also important to note when we look at that graphic on the left. And then on the right, you can also just see the vast difference between levels of unemployment of people of color in general.
Yes, Hunter makes an excellent point. Now moving on to the candidates individually, Trump, in a broad manner, with Trump, we're going to talk about the broad economy before we move into specific policies. Now, under Trump, African Americans have a compound annual growth rate of 3.8 compared to their 1.8 under Obama. While this is mostly due to the recession and other economic factors outside of presidential control, there are factors in there that have been tied to Trump's economic plan, such as his position of having a strong labor market, leading to the growth of net worth held by those in the bottom 50% of the American economy by 47%, which is just under $600 billion in a net worth increase. Now, this also shows that white Americans have also been, what is the word I'm looking for? White Americans have also had their annual growth rate increased as opposed to the Obama one, though not quite as much as Black Americans have and other minority groups. Then, aside from this, the growth in net worth, as mentioned in the chart, and well, it has mentioned in the chart on the next slide, which you'll see in just a moment. Here it is. The growth in wealth for the bottom half of our economic system is almost triple our federal spending on supplemental nutrition assistance program, which is food stamps, which is definitely a good thing, as it means that just the growth in wealth, not the actual amount of wealth, has, as I said before, tripled the food stamp spending, which can only be a positive correlation. Moving on to Trump's more specific plans, the policy I mentioned earlier about a strong labor market combines with a newer policy I haven't mentioned yet about a less regulated economy. This leads to a stronger overall job market, the number of people living in poverty having dropped by approximately 2.5 million during his first 2 years in office. While there are still hurdles which prevent low-income workers from taking full advantage of the economy, Trump is attempting to lower these hurdles by attempting to incentivize private investment in disadvantaged areas through opportunity zones. Now, an opportunity zone is an area that's very economically distressed, so new investments are eligible for preferential tax treatments. And while all of this and what I've spoken have been Trump's plans for, and what he has done in his first 4 years in office, these are his plans and policies that he'd like to keep inputting if he were to win again. Now, moving on to Biden, I'm going to let Hunter lead the way.
All right. So Biden obviously does not have 4 years behind him to talk about what he has done like President Trump does, but he has released multiple strategies for how he's going to level out this inequality as far as unemployment goes in the United States. So his policy for Black Americans is called Lift Every Voice, and it's the Biden Plan for Black America. So according to this plan, Biden says that he's going to incentivize diverse hiring processes by providing grants to states, local governments, and organizations to develop diverse hiring processes. So basically what he wants to do is to make sure that companies are trying their hardest to be a diverse workplace. And now this is something that is not very common recently, just has been more common for companies to do to make sure they're hiring a more diverse workplace. But this is something that's still very new, and this is something that he really wants to tackle and to make more of an agenda out of. So in order to do that, he's going to require that companies make public their workforce diversity as well as their senior level diversity. So we obviously see that in the lower levels of management and workplace, diversity is not as big of an issue in some places, but when we get to senior level jobs, there is there's a good bit of inequality as far as who holds those positions, whether they're white Americans or Americans of color. And then another big thing that he is doing is supporting the Ban the Box legislation, which removes the requirement for job seekers to disclose any criminal convictions. So when you apply for a job, any application is usually going to ask you if you have ever been convicted of any crime. And what that does, or what Biden says that does, is hinders people from hiring people who might have anything on their criminal record. And what he wants these workplaces to do is look at a more broad human approach as far as like what specialties this person has, what they bring to the table, and their past experiences, and less about they had this one conviction when they were 16 years old. Now this person is 30. They haven't had any since then, but since they have that one, we're not going to hire them. He wants workplaces to look at more about the person and what they can offer to that workplace.
So clarifying about that legislation for the class, when Biden says that he'd like to remove the requirement for people to list their if they do have a criminal background of any nature, that isn't complete, correct? Like he doesn't mean that there's no danger he's allowing people into, correct?
Yes, so it would not be for felonies, but just for misdemeanors and things such as that. But even if they do have convicted felonies, he still wants the workplace to look at more of a broad, what does this person have to offer as far as what they can help the business with, instead of just saying because this person has been convicted of something, we're not going to hire them at all. We're not going to look at the rest of the application.
Absolutely. What a fantastic idea. Oh.
What kind of economy do we want? And who will it serve? In the coming weeks, I'll lay out a plan I've developed for my comprehensive plan, not just to build back the economy, the way it was before COVID-19, but to build it back better. It was already hurting for so many people. A plan to create millions of new good-paying jobs with benefits where people get a fair return on work, where we make the country stronger, more resilient, more just. As you'll see, that plan is anchored in job-creating investments in small businesses, trillions of dollars in infrastructure, investing in innovation, manufacturing, caregiving, and rewiring the faulty structures of our economy to ensure the dignity and equality for all American workers. There's a public health crisis, a job crisis, a crisis of inequity and indignity being endured by African Americans and many other people of color. Those three challenges alone are deeply connected to one another. So the solutions have to be connected as well. Any economic plan must start with a public health plan to make sure tests are available and they're able to be traced, test and tracing. Get this our society functioning to build back the confidence we need to truly bring back jobs and small businesses. But that's only the first step. My job plan talks about restoring the dignity to American people. In addition to pursuing badly needed reforms, we need to grow wages, level the playing field, create tens of millions of new good-paying jobs to build a better American future. There's a monumental amount of work to be done to repair the damage that has already been done. And simply tweeting slogans like "transition to greatness," end of quote, won't solve anything for the families who are hurting and wondering, where do I go next?
So as you can see, Biden has not actually released his plan for creating these jobs yet, but he says that it's not just talking about creating jobs, but we have to look at all of these factors of inequality in order to create one solution, instead of just looking at each factor and creating a solution for that one factor. So I think that's notable. Now we're going to move on to talking about the solutions to this problem of unemployment and inequality. So first of all, I want to talk about how we get to the root of the problem. So a researcher from Skidmore College in New York suggests that the inequality that exists in unemployment should not be looked at as an individual problem. So that is, it's not the individual's attributes that make them more likely to be unemployed, but that it is a regional and state attribute that might be to blame. So this is not the fact that this individual lacks the skills, because as we saw earlier in class this semester, a black man with the same amount of skills and schooling as a white man is less likely to get the job than the white person is. So this researcher is not looking at those individual differences, but looking at, is there something about the region or the state that this person is in that might cause this person to not get the job. So after collecting and analyzing the data, the outcomes showed that some states are much more likely to have black exclusion in their labor markets. So it was, notably it was Midwestern states, which was very surprising. But the researcher says that this could be because of the region's politics, policies, or demographics. And the researcher does note that these aspects could provide some answer to the reason that unemployment inequality exists. And she hopes that in the future, when research is done, they will look at these certain aspects to see what they can do to hopefully level out the playing field for these Americans of color. So also, I want to talk about how we're going to solve this issue, because that's the biggest point about this project, is how we're going to solve these inequality issues that we're talking about. So a researcher named Kenya Covington at the University of California in Los Angeles focused on a spatial mismatch and how it leads to unemployment inequality in metropolitan areas. So I'm going to just explain what spatial mismatch is right now. So we're actually talking about like access to jobs. So that's going to be like, do you have a car to drive to this workplace? If you notice, a lot of job applications will ask you if you have reliable transportation. And a lot of people of color and minorities actually don't have access to reliable transportation to get to their jobs. So spatial mismatch is actually how far away people are from available jobs. So the research showed that people of color were actually farther away from available jobs and also lacked transportation to get to those. And their white counterparts were closer and also had access to transportation to get to their jobs. And so the research showed that non-white people in large metropolitan areas were less likely to own a car or have access to reliable public transportation. So this means that these people were not able to access work like their white counterparts were, like I said earlier, thus making them more likely to be out of work. Because if you don't have reliable transportation and you can't get to your job, the employer is more than likely not going to hire you. The author also suggests that cities should invest more in public transportation, especially in areas that are not already serviced. So this is the solution to this problem that this researcher believes that could help. So if cities put more money into public transportation as far as like buses go, subways goes, and they invest money into areas that aren't serviced at the moment, certain neighborhoods that might not have a bus that goes to them, and these people have to walk maybe 20, 30 minutes to the next neighborhood just to get on a bus to go into the city. This researcher thinks that this could lead to more minority people getting jobs inside the city. She also suggests that emerging cities should look into policies such as transit-oriented development, which means that cities are more walkable, affordable, and work options are available in and close around the city. So when we have smaller metropolitan areas that are emerging into larger cities, we have plenty of those across the U.S., especially now that people are moving out of the huge cities and moving into smaller suburbs. These places are sometimes city planners will plan these so that they're very walkable cities. And that's not only good for tourism and such things like that, but it's also good for the people who live there, especially minorities, which means that they can actually walk to their jobs instead of having to have a car or a bus to take them there. And it's also more affordable for those people to live there, and more work options are available in and close around those cities to supply all the people that live there.
Now, out of curiosity, Hunter, because that is obviously such a big infrastructure problem and not really a partisan issue, making cities more walkable, I think that's something both sides could agree that everybody wants. Do you think that is an issue that both candidates should support, and even on a more local level, that mayors and uh, House representatives and senators should potentially get together to endorse?
I definitely think that's something that should not be a bipartisan issue. I think that I think both parties on either side of the aisle want more jobs to come to America. But just in the aspect of this, I think that it's very important for these minorities to have places to live like this so that they can get to work easier. As far as the transit-oriented development cities go. As far as public transportation goes, I think that that is something that a lot of money has to go into, and that's definitely going to be up to more local principalities as far as that goes. But we should definitely see presidential candidates supporting those type of things, as it will increase the job market.
All right, that makes lots of sense. And I'd like to say thank you to the class and everybody for listening and giving us your support throughout this. We hope you guys have a fantastic rest of the day.